Good evening, and welcome to the Pharaoh channel. Here talking about art, as ever. It's obviously been a little while, so for those fans who have been desperately waiting, thank you for being patient with me as we kind of produce content. But over the last 9 or so months, I think, since I've been did a stream on the channel, I've been working away alongside some familiar names on a new exhibition that's happening in London next week. And I wanted to kind of bring the exciting news to all of you and to go through, hopefully, a little bit more detail about some of the deeper thought and understanding that the artists share collectively. So, but first off, let me just a little introduction. Alexander Adams, show stalwart, welcome. How are you, sir?
Diversity is our strength, comrade. It's been a while since I've said that. Thank you very much, Pharaoh. I feel like I should be passing on to Panama Hat at this stage, but yes, rest assured, there's been that the band has not broken up. We are just doing our solo work. We're doing our solo albums at the moment, but we will be getting back together, I hope, when Pharaoh has time to devote to these streams.
I have lots of ideas. It's very, very tiring. For those who don't know, I've had child number 2, and I'll tell you, it's a big step up energy level wise, and he's still waking up 2 or 3 times in the night. So no, it's wonderful. I love the boys, but yeah, very, very tiring. But yes, and our second guest, fellow parent, and also collaborator on the channel, Fen De Villiers, the man, the legend. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me on. And oh God, it's really exciting, isn't it? It's just a few days now. It's incredible, actually, because I remember we were discussing a number of months ago. We were saying, well, we've got loads of time and we've got this and that. And it's incredible how time just absolutely flies. I mean, I think it was literally like 3 or 4 months ago, you and I were having discussion and we were like, yeah, but we've got time. And then it's like, wow, okay, now we're at it. It's a week. It's almost here. So it's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, I would say that it's actually very well prepared. And I've been involved in many other events, but obviously nothing as artistic as this. Actually, I have helped put on one big show before.
Yeah.
And we are substantially more organized than any of those.
Well, that is certainly good to know.
it always happens in the last 24 hours. That's the magic hour. But
I think we should explain what we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. Well, Alex, I was just going to say.
Oh.
Do you want to kick us off and tell us a little bit about the idea behind it, how it came to be?
Yeah. Well, I will. First of all, I will tell you that this is going to be an exhibition that will be open to the public from the 4th of July until the 9th of July. So that's opening to the public on the Tuesday. So this is coming Tuesday. And it's closing on the Sunday. If you're coming on the Sunday, please come early because we will be taking the work down later on in the day. So if you don't want to be disappointed, make sure you come before lunchtime, I would say. And this is happening at a gallery venue in central London. The specific address will be announced on the eve of the opening to create excitement and drama and to add an element of suspense, I believe, is what I've been told to say. You can get you can get an email of this information if you go to the-exhibition.co.uk and submit your email address, and you will get information about the show and the artists only. I believe what's our system here. We're not going to be spamming anything or selling any data or anything like that.
Yeah, we've just been sending out the occasional kind of behind the scenes email and just little updates with what's going on every so often. But we'll send out the address on Monday over email, and also we'll put it on the website and tweet it out. And I'll do a community note as well, so you don't miss out. But it's right in the centre of London, so just get into London, get into a pub, hang out on Tuesday and pop by. And then just in terms of
we should say also that it's very close to public transport, so it's close to buses, tube, and mainline trains. So you've got no problem about getting there without a private vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in terms of the artists, we've got 7 people involved in total, with a range of artistic mediums, and I hear a poet is going to be included as part of it, and that's where one of our compatriots is. He's working away right now, slaving in the poetry mines, trying to upload stuff. So it's going to be super exciting. But maybe Fenn, Alex, it'd be great to hear your thoughts about how you think this exhibition's a little bit different to, I guess, kind of other contemporary shows that's out there right now. Like, why do you think that we are producing something that's kind of unique? And then maybe we can talk about some of these bigger ideas, kind of from a philosophical perspective, that underpin what we're talking about.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to say hello to people in chat. Feel free to comment. We will try and respond to some of your comments and any questions. So thanks for keeping it lively, and do share the fact that we're going out live right now, so we can get in a few more bodies and generate a bit more attention and excitement for this stream and for the exhibition. So I will hand over now to Fenn.
Yeah, so, I mean, well, good evening, chat. Thanks for tuning in. I see that there's been a number of people on Twitter who have become very excited by this this gathering of 7 artists to come together and show some work in the heart of London. I would say, to answer your question, Pharaoh, this has been something of a wet dream to a degree that I've had, and I know a number of artists in our space have had, of actually, coming together in real life and showing a series of work. I think that it's a refreshing change to many of the contemporary arts exhibitions that are going on these days, because we're not actively out there trying to do a show that is fitting to some of the, should we say, some of the more regime standard sort of language and positions. We are simply just coming together to show some art, hopefully some art that is uplifting, art that has some strength and power to it. And I think what's really been sort of an exciting banding together here is coming up with a series of principles. I posted these recently. Well, we've all shared them. A series of principles where we sort of mark down in a very sort of early way where we feel we should be aligned if we are artists, to try and gain or try and tap a fresh vein that brings us onto more truthful ground. So we came up with this series of principles, or shall I say, Alexander Adams came up with these principles, and I helped edit and have a look through them. I think there was some really fantastic back and forth that we had, and then we sort of distilled it down to these 7 principles. And I think it's something that I've mentioned a number of times before in previous exhibitions, and I've had discussions with other artists just out in the standard sort of art world, is that I've always asked them this question: is what exactly is it you stand for? And artists of the past would stand for something. They would at least have a series of principles that they would stand for, be it in manifestos or be it in just loosely put together principles or whatever. And I think that it's a refreshing thing to be able to, well, bring a series of principles together that all 7 of us artists actually kind of agree on and can start to see common ground on. But it's also important to set down a vision of where you will ground your art, not just now, but also going forward. And of course, our hope is to bring together other artists that will will help the group grow and have, take these ideas further. And all of these principles and these ideas can hopefully, mature, and we can start to see these elements come through in the work. And so it's, it's an exciting position. I think it's a very exciting position for all of us, because as I said in the start, it's like, how many artist groups and collectives do we really have forming at this time now? It seems so difficult to get artists to come together in this period. So many of us are atomized. Even if you're not atomized, there's sort of this incentive to be on your own and just do your own thing. And why would you mix with other artists and this kind of thing? So I think it's definitely refreshing to come together as a collective now and try and gain some ground on the cultural spectrum.
And just on that, I think there's a few interesting points before we go into the principles. From my perspective, if you look around the current art scene, as Alexander Adams has often pointed out, much of it is driven by ACE, Arts Council England, certainly in the UK, which is a significant funder for many shows. And due to the nature of the way that ACE funds shows, having you kind of mentioned kind of being aligned with regime ideology, Fenn, it's very much baked into the way that ACE funds things. So if you go along with certain things, or you're a certain type of person, then you have a much higher chance of achieving funding. Now,
exactly.
I think fundamentally it begs a bigger question around like what is the place of art in modern society? How should it be funded?
Yes.
And I think one of the things we're trying to do is to just sort of step back from the ideology and step back from the activism that goes on, and
artivism.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to create something very much focused on the work, but still underpinned by a different set of ideas. And again, I think it's interesting because the ideas that most contemporary art have is based on like non-philosophical things. It's based on the political.
Yes.
I am this kind of person. I believe in this sort of thing.
Yes.
Therefore, I get my funding, or I kind of get amplified by different institutions. But interestingly, I think many of them don't have virtually any philosophical or aesthetic understanding as to what do they even believe in, from a kind of this idea of a transcendent or a deeper plane. But just before we go into the principles, I want to throw it over to Alex and your thoughts on the contemporary scene versus what we're doing. Do you think we are going against the stream somewhat?
Yes, I would think it's really interesting because, as Fenn pointed out, what art movements are you seeing and what collectives are you seeing? You're only seeing them on the left. And it's very interesting that you are getting these, basically you're getting art groups, artist collectives, where they just have a name and the members just sort of filter in and out. The actual individuals are not actually important. This is really interesting because this is only happening on the left. These art groups are, we're not planning to do anything like that ourselves. We don't actually have an official name. We won't be sort of doing, I'm not sure if we'll be doing collective projects, but that won't be the only thing we'll be doing. We'll be doing our own individual work. We'll talk about that later. We were all following slightly different styles. We have different influences and so forth. But the collectives are actually rising on the left. And it's very interesting to see a collaborative group arising on the non-left. Let's say describe ourselves as non-leftists. You can apply whatever label you like, and I'm sure people will do. But it's important that we show that it's important, and this is part of the principles, that it's important to have collective action, even if you're not on the left. That it's really important that you form communities, that you form networks of fans, supporters, critics, patrons, art dealers, publishers, so forth, that we need these sorts of communities which the left takes for granted, not least because the left gets them funded by the Arts Council and by the local council. And so you get these artivists, and I've written a book called Artivism, which is about this subject, where you have basically effectively non-artists, basically art graduates who have no particular ability, no qualities, no vision, no principles, who are essentially employed as freelance contractors to local venues which need an art about immigration. We've got an exhibition to do with the contributions of the Windrush generation, and we've got a grant of £50,000 to put into this, so you and a couple of your mates, you can do something with Black children in your area. Well, that's fine. I wouldn't call that art. I mean, it might be fine as community work. It might be fine as social outreach. It may not be fine as these things also, but I wouldn't class that as art. I would call that something else. So I think it's really important that we understand the power of the collective and group movements on the non-left.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Someone put in the chat, sensible centrist. Could that? Yeah, certainly.
Yes. Thank you very much to Reactionary Reading Law, a friend of mine and some of ours on our side.
Just one thing on the funding thing. I'd just like to say that we have organised this all ourselves. Everything's been paid for by ourselves. There's been one sponsor who's helped out with some of the venue fees, and we're very thankful for that. But yes. I would say, in general, all of the will and motivation and drive has been by ourselves,
and no money from the Arts Council.
Well, exactly.
That's surprisingly.
And it's been very tough and very demanding. But again, this is another reason why I think we're unique, because I think the system that you laid out just there, Alex, perfectly is a system that doesn't care about quality. It just cares about ends. It cares about how can we achieve this ideological end, as opposed to fundamentally producing good art. And again, I think that's one of the kind of core understandings between us. Is it's all about the work, it's all about what we're producing, and it's about hopefully starting an exciting movement as well, and inspiring other people to get involved and to create something not just for now but for future generations as well.
And I would say that this is what we're going to talk about. These principles apply to us, but these are the sort of principles that could apply to you, and whether or not you exhibit with us, whether or not you're fans of the sort of work that art that we make, because we make quite a range of art, but you may feel that some different kind of art is best for you to embody these principles. These are the sorts of things that you could follow in your professional life or in your outlook, and that these are good principles to follow in general, even if you don't become part of our movement, as it were.
Yes, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up there, is sort of, for others to read into these principles and to see what we're putting forward, and to then also open, hopefully a very sort of passionate dialogue going forward. I mean, hopefully with people at the exhibition that will come along, but also, people online where we can have discussions and have, put a lot of thought into this as to where, an alternative cultural stream can actually go, because there is a considerable amount of discussion on Twitter, and I think many of us either partake in it or read the discussions that are going on, and you see a lot of people on Twitter who are saying, oh, there needs to be a return to this, or there needs to be this, or there needs to be that, and it's often very superficial. It doesn't go, there is no real depth to it. It's just sort of like, oh, we like to see realistic figure sculpting return, or we'd like to see figurative painting return in this style or manner. But then it's like it sort of ends there. It's simply just a kind of, well, it's simply just
stylistic fetishism, I would say.
Yes, there is that to a degree. So, sorry, Farah, go on. Yeah.
No. All I wanted to say on that was that, again, but then it goes down to the work again, because just because you're painting in a certain style doesn't elevate your work above others. You need to have the quality as well as the technique and everything else behind it at the same time. So I think that's why if you look through all of the works, it's very eclectic. It's loads of different mediums, loads of different ideas and thoughts behind it. There is no one, I would say, unifying style really across the whole range. But there's a lot of good work at the same time.
And that's also the thing that I find interesting about this body of work that's coming together here at the London exhibition is I feel like it's also in its nascent stage. You know, there's so many different directions or so many different inputs that could come in on this. And this is essentially our first show. So what I kind of dream of is like exhibition 2 or 3 or 4, and how things and ideas can develop further, how certain visual dialogues can open up between artists. As I mentioned in the Twitter stream, there's like a sort of a visual dialogue going on between myself and Stoat, the great master Stoat. And that's a really exciting thing to see, because this is again something that you would see more often happening with artists of the past. I mean, you don't really have it that often now with these exhibitions where there'll be someone making some sculpture and then there'll be some paintings based on those sculptures, and then in turn a piece of sculpture will then slightly change due to that painting. You know, there is a kind of riffing that goes on and takes place between artists when you come together and do collaborative exhibitions like this, and that's very important for culture. That's very important for visual culture, because you can't just feed yourself from visual culture from the internet or something. There needs to be that in-person connection. There needs to be that visitation of an artist's studio. Going, like when I go to London, I'm obviously going to be seeing what Stoat's up to in his painting studio, and hopefully, he will come over to Antwerp again soon and see what's going on here. And those sorts of visual dialogues need to take place, because that's some of the greatest works have come about through that riffing off one another's pieces. Like just that dialogue where an artist will say, "Oh, I really love the shape you've used there. I'm going to incorporate that into one of my paintings." Or like I might look at a painting and say, "Wow, I really love the subject you've addressed there." And that's now going to start coming into a whole series of new sculptures that I'm doing. And that is culture. That right there is that cultural, that organic manifestation that's going on. And it's not being driven, as you see so much of the art now, being driven actually from a sort of a top-down level, where it's simply just, oh, make it about this, and this subject, and you'll get a show. Where it's astroturfed culture. That is essentially zombified culture. It's not something that has any real virile force in it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, enough build up. Let's bring up the list. And I think the way we're going to do this is that, Alex, I want you to take us through each point, and then we can chat about it, maybe have a little discussion about our thoughts. So, but Fenn actually did the original statement at the top here, didn't you? So maybe, Fenn, you should read this out in the most dramatic way possible, and then we'll go to the principles.
In the most dramatic way possible. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I'll just read it out to you. So, okay, it's a little bit small on my screen there. Hang on a second. I can see it now. Okay. Yes. Oh, hang on.
Too small.
Too big. Okay. We come together because we are hungry for true beauty, aesthetic strength, and vital expressions, a culture that energizes. This is a momentous occasion, like-minded artists from across the world joining forces to herald a cultural shift. We refuse to merely remain on the sidelines watching as the flame of creation is smothered by petty ideology. Inspired by the collectives that have formed before us, we move unapologetically to carve out a new route in this time of artistic stagnation. If we don't rekindle the fire, who will?
Well, thanks very much for that, Fenn. Okay, so let's go into the principles. These are the principles that we collectively stand for. I'll read them out, Alex. You don't have to do that, and then you can chat through them. Number 1, there is such a thing as beauty. It exists in what seems to us pleasing and correct. We are unafraid to use plain language to describe images and objects as beautiful or ugly, important or trite, art or not art. Art gains character when its maker strives for the remarkable. It loses vigor when the artist refuses to apply discernment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is already a very controversial point, isn't it, Alex?
Well, I mean, this is something that you will not hear in any mainstream art school anymore. Sadly, you won't hear this in university departments. You won't hear this taught on art history courses or any sort of a lot of philosophical courses dealing with it when they touch on the subject of aesthetics. So we're not afraid to say that there are things that we believe in, and that one of these is that there is beauty, and that your art can be dedicated to making something that is beautiful, something that may even be pretty, something that may be beautiful and strange or uncanny or powerful or odd. For example, Charles Baudelaire, the poet and critic, said that modern beauty had a twist of strangeness. So this is perhaps not a conventional beauty, and I'm not sure that the artist, I'm pretty sure that all of the artists in the exhibition, you will find something strange and individual and striking about what they find beautiful or compelling. So I don't think you're going to find any cliches in the exhibition, and I think that's quite important. And this is the sort of thing that we should be able to say, but that the relativists of postmodernism would simply refute as well subjective, and they're correct to a degree. It is subjective, but there is an objective thing as beauty.
That is something that I've noticed, is that there is certainly a flux around that. You can't fully pin beauty down to just an absolutely objective thing. I mean, naturally, if we were to look at beauty standards, one could say, something that, an element that makes something beautiful, it will have a certain balance or a certain harmony to it, or there is a certain line running through the work, geometric line running through the work that carries the eye in a pleasing way, in which the eye sort of dances around the page or a piece of sculpture in a kind of harmonious manner. These are things that bring about a sense of beauty or rest for the eye. But it doesn't just simply have to be that. It can also be, I take on this idea that essentially, to make something beautiful, at least in my work, I look for sort of force and power as beauty, something that has a deep sense of energy and force or energetic expression within it, carries a sort of beauty to it. I don't subscribe to my work or any of the work that I make to attempting to be pretty, for example. It's definitely not that line of beautiful. It's not in the sense of saying I'm making something that's just purely pleasing. That there has to be something more there, something on a deeper level. So yeah, indeed, it's. I think in these times, we would say that beauty certainly takes on different elements, and I think that probably comes from early modernism to a degree.
But even before then, I would say someone like Burke, with his discourse on the sublime and the beautiful, talking about something like a mountain, which is beautiful but also powerful at the same time.
Yes,
and as opposed to his example was a woman. This is his words, not mine. Who is soft and smooth, and non-powerful as well. So this idea of power as beauty has its roots in a very strong strain of aesthetic philosophy. One thing I would say on this first point is it is not only a hand grenade, a metaphorical hand grenade towards the existing art establishment, which has this
how it's around.
Postmodern, fully subjectivist view, but also I think it is would definitely ruffle up more, as we call them, kind of like trad art accounts on Twitter, who again have a very specific idea of what beauty is, and this again I'm particularly interested in Gothic ideas of the grotesque. Someone like Bosch, for example.
Yes.
His depiction of hell is just like nightmarish, grotesque, but there is an undeniable beauty in the work and quality.
Absolutely.
Is the fact it has this kind of stomach churning effect. Make it bad art and unbeautiful. And I think no, and I think that's a really good initial point. So
that is a great point. Yeah, I like that. That's a really good example you've given there. Totally agree.
Let's go on to number 2 there. Point number 2. Therefore, we realize that art at the highest level can never be egalitarian, nor espouse egalitarianism. There is no equality, nor can there be. Art must be excellent to be great, and this demands the exceptional achievements of individuals, sometimes working together. There is no replacement for the artist of talent or genius.
Yeah. So this is a statement that we do need to come together, but we believe in the importance of individual artists and their own individual ability, and that to work at the highest level, you have to strive, and some people are going to be better than others. I'm not sure that any of us are claiming that we are the best artists in the world, or at least we're not publicly claiming it. We might be feeling it. We might be feeling it or thinking it, but we're not going to be saying that. So we're not saying. So if anyone's out there who's of a similar mindset and sympathetic and is looking at this and thinking, well, why aren't I included? Well, there's a possibility that we don't know who you are, or that you're living in the wrong continent at the moment, so it's really difficult to coordinate with you. We're happy to look at other work and to think about other work, but we are getting together on the basis of we have similar aims, we are sympathetic, we know each other either personally, or we know each other sort of professionally through sort of social media or exhibitions or other means. So and we're saying that we do not believe that everyone can be an artist, or that anyone can be an artist. It is reserved for certain people who have that ability. We have that ability. It is down to you, the viewer, to decide if you think we meet the mark of greatness.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's something that it's something that I've come across, since the days of the, since the days when I was at the academy in Antwerp, and I was a student. I went to many, many different exhibitions, and I really sunk my teeth into the art scene in Antwerp and in Belgium, actually. And I traveled around, Germany, France. And what I noticed back then, and of course it's just continued, is that it became less and less about the work, and it just became more and more about, everyone's an artist, everyone's allowed to participate, and this general just sort of democratization that was going on with the arts. And it didn't make any sense to me, because studying at an academy where you're being given the standards of how to actually sculpt from life, you're being taught how to make monumental work. It's figurative. You're studying anatomy. You're taking considerable time to master your craft. Even if now I haven't gone on to continue that style, I'm doing my own thing, but there is a considerable amount of work that goes into creating art and following the path of an artist. And for someone to say that, well, it doesn't really matter, anyone can be an artist. I mean, you see someone like Ai Weiwei continuously broadcasting this idea of everyone's an artist and anyone's an artist, and anything that anyone has to say is important. And of course it's nonsense, and it's just this sort of fuzzy feel good sort of stuff that the regime likes to put out, so they can kind of shotgun the mass with all sorts of propaganda that masquerades as art. And so it's.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying about the ACE stuff, where they will fund the right person, but not the great person. The person that fits the profile, and not necessarily the person who does the good work. I mean, this is obviously a hugely controversial statement, and if we were to say this in any art school, we would.
It's extraordinarily
get shouted at.
No, I mean,
vigorously.
This is really extraordinarily controversial. When I wrote my manifesto at my last major solo show, and I put out similar ideas to this in their most simple form, it was really shocking. And the thing is when you look at it, you think to yourself, well, it really shouldn't be shocking, but this is really like, wow, you're not allowed to say that, and how dare you? And it's something that I think should start to be said, and it's something that I think in time more and more people will begin to understand that they've been hoodwinked.
Just on this, I mean, I don't want to go too much into some of the reasons why I agree with it philosophically, but there's always an interesting parallel, and I think we have to frame it in terms of this idea of the great man. This Carlylean idea of someone that has the ability to change history as an individual. And I always remember many discussions I don't know if you guys have ever heard of In Our Time, which is like a Radio 4, I don't know, kind of like history
yes.
/ arts.
Before I quit Radio 4 in absolute disgust,
Yes.
2 years ago, completely related to current events happening in early 2020.
Yeah, of course.
I do remember listening to it.
But often when they would talk about scientific discoveries, there would often be big discussions around, if an inventor wasn't there, would the work still have been created? And I actually always think about the great artists of the past. If a certain artist in the history wasn't there, would their style or would their works be created by someone else? And I think the answer is obviously no. If there was a Michelangelo-shaped hole in our history, would there ever be, the Sistine Chapel, Sistine Chapel frescoes, or David, etc.? Art really shows the power of the great man. It is not like I would say that there's definite waves and there's definite moves and feelings within a group of people, but fundamentally it does boil down to that artist creating that one piece of art, and the people that we remember are individuals. So it's obvious in my mind that if you're thinking about, if I said to you who is the greatest artist, you would come up with 3 or 4. This is one field where it's very obvious that egalitarianism just isn't true.
Yes, exactly. And this idea that we've got, thousands now, literally thousands, tens of thousands of artists all around us, and, filling museums and art galleries and whatever is kind of, it's kind of extraordinary, really. I don't think we've ever been in such a period where there are so many artists. I mean, there's an artist on every corner now. You'll find artists everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
And that's why they are so cheap. There's just an economic point of view. There's overproduction of these people, therefore they're willing to work for nothing, or virtually nothing, and that's why they can be bought up by the dozen by the Arts Council, because there are so many artists looking for patrons. Anyways, it's a complicated subject, but yeah, basically there's so many sort of people with artist qualifications who are not artists, just floating around, swilling around in the system, waiting to be subsidized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, number 3. Art of power springs from a true and powerful vital essence found in many styles and techniques. We are aware that traditional forms and iconography can be parasiticized. Thanks, Alex, for that. And corrupted. It is this vital spark that should be respected and understood, then transmitted.
Yeah. So this is basically the vitalist view of art, saying the power of art does not reside purely in the content. It does not reside purely in the style. It resides in the spirit, which is transmitted through differing styles. And even if you may be working in a traditional form, you may be unaware that this has been turned to regime-friendly outlooks, or it may have been hollowed out It may be you are painting a biscuit tin with a flag on it, but the contents are not really meaningful, and that this flag and the symbols that you are painting have been corrupted, parasitized, subverted, and so forth. So the importance is the vital aspect, the vital element, which continues through various artists, not solely in the form.
Fenn, vitality. We have 5 minutes just to rein you in already.
Well, I mean, my view has always been coming at life from a vitalist standpoint. Is that an artist must stay true to that vital essence and creation. He shouldn't be selling himself out to be doing just the bidding, or doing the bidding of the regime players. It's to create art is an intuitive response to the material in front of you. It's a spiritual endeavor. And if we look at everything that is around us in nature, everything that grows, everything that has that force to grow and move upwards towards the sun, I believe that an artist has to in some way align with that same creative force in which to create art. And indeed, depending, that can come in many different styles and techniques and approaches, but it's to stay true to that life essence and to that vital spark. That is what drives the artist. And I think that's a really, really important thing that Alexander put down there on the principles, because it's something that I think is sort of forgotten. It's a sacred, to create is a sacred act. And I think it's important that it is guarded. I think it is important that it is understood on those terms. It's not simply just making a bit of, I'm making a bit of art now. It's a dedicated thing, and you are in alignment with that creative force, at least from my opinion.
Just from my side, I think vitality and this idea of organicness is tied together, and it comes out of a people's or a group of people who have this, who are alive, who have this living energy.
Yes.
And I would say the situation that we find ourselves in today is that so many of our traditions have been wiped out. At the end of the First World War, all those craftsmen, all those creators, all those artists, tens of thousands, their knowledge and skill was never passed on to the next generation, simply because it was a massacre of humanity, but also of art and culture and tradition in many ways, in my mind. And so we're left in a place where we're sort of decoupled from the past. Like, we can look at art from the past. We can even try and paint like art from the past. We can forensically look into, here's the type of paints they used at this time, etc., and try to recreate it. But it's all a simulacrum of that tradition ultimately, because you're not connected through a vital essence.
That is so true. That is so true.
So I think. So what I think we're trying to do is to start again to plant the seed of something that could grow into that. Now, again, that to start again, you've got to have a starting point, and so it's inevitable you're going to have anchors and roots that you draw from.
Yes.
But again, this idea of organic vitality is creating something that's alive, that is moving, that is growing as well.
So true. So well said, Ferro, actually. So well said. That is something I completely agree with. And when you talk about this craft, and you talk about this ability to make art, it's certainly you've really summed it up very well. Because I mean, I can look back at sculpture, I look back at Art Deco sculpture, I look back at the Futurists, I look back at the Forticists, and I can look at what they were doing, and you've got an image, or perhaps you've got a catalog, or you've got an old book or whatever, and you look back at those works, and you can inspire on those things, and you can riff on them. But there are certain there are still certain elements and approaches to form that I look at and I think, oh, how did they achieve that? Or what was their approach to understanding that form? Or how did they understand how light would affect that form? And you start to realize that all of this was a sort of science and a kind of, it was something that was taught to you by certain masters that was indeed a living culture. And now we are artists among the ruins, really, to use that Evolian term. We are artists among the ruins, attempting to pick up the pieces, attempting to rekindle some element of a flame and nurture that so we can build a foundation. And only off of that foundation can we actually start to springboard. And that is I'm so glad you bring that up, because that is such a key element. And it's something that I'm thinking about regularly now in this time.
Okay, next point, number 4. We assert the primacy of aesthetics that embodies values. And this can only be done through mastery of craft and understanding of materials. Art and message are indivisible. No verbal explanation is necessary because the art object contains everything needed.
Yeah, so I think this is pretty self-explanatory. This is I think I'm not sure if you could call it a body blow, but it's certainly a swipe at conceptual art. It's also having a pop at basically what everyone was taught at art school. Well, certainly I was taught it back in the 90s, and I now know it's sort of common, that you're essentially designed by your tutors if you go to art school in order to argue your case like a lawyer. So not really to make your argument through your art, but to have some sort of verbal explanation. That's always kind of interesting to have the statements of serious artists. That can be illuminating, can be helpful. It can also help you create your own art. But in general, I would say that the most important thing about art is the physical stuff and how you respond to it. My definition of art would be something that you can bury under the ground for 3,000 years, and then another civilization completely unconnected to yours can dig up, and they find it beautiful and powerful without any understanding at all of the original culture.
Wonderful.
I often think in the future, when all of our empires are but ruins, and the archaeologists of that long descended race dig up the whole of St. Martin's, they would consider it to be nothing more than a garbage heap where random objects were thrown together, as opposed to an art studio.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't be entirely wrong. Or wrong at all.
but come on, don't you enjoy a found object hanging from the ceiling with strings and balloons, guys? I mean, come on. Are you telling me that it doesn't touch you intellectually and excite you? Is that what you're saying?
It excites me and things that I would like to do to it, and the people who venerate it. Yes, in that way, it does stimulate me creatively. Yes.
Oh my goodness! No, fantastic. No, this is actually something that's very interesting because, naturally, if we can step more towards this intuitive response to art, and you don't need a massive blurb, and as you say, sort of argue your case like a lawyer for art, I think that's a better place to be, in the sense that when you show a piece of work, it's not something that you have to get into some kind of verbal battle about. I mean, sure, there'll be a certain story, or perhaps you can say, well, I was inspired by this or that, but it doesn't have to go too much further than that, really. A piece of work should ideally speak for itself.
Definitely. Okay, on to the next one. Point number 5. Therefore, there is no single style or expression that is supreme. We shall incorporate whatever means and materials necessary. These may include new materials, old expressions, and yet to be discovered media, as long as they express the truths of human existence, struggle, imperfection, and yearning for the transcendent. By this, do you mean we're going to replace all of our art with AI digital art, Alexander?
Yeah, absolutely. This is simply a Trojan horse for the destruction of art, as the traditionalists will point out to you quite correctly. Yes, I confess it's all a big. I'm a Fed. That's it. I'm a Fed in the pay of Ace and AI art. So yeah. So this is essentially saying that we reserve the right to use whatever means necessary in order to express ourselves, to explore ideas, to transmit values and virtues, and try and embody virtues as well through art. And so, yeah, I do have a huge respect for tradition. I do have a huge respect for skill. If you take any time to look at my work and think about it and look at the way I make things, you will see that I'm very careful about how I make things, my use of materials, and especially making artists' original prints, which I think we can reveal exclusively will be available. Can we reveal that these will be Pharaoh? Can we reveal?
Sorry, I missed that last part.
Can we? So there you are. Pharaoh's off listening to someone else's stream at the moment. So Pharaoh, can we reveal something exciting about the website that's going to be happening in the next few days?
Oh yes, yeah. Feel free to.
So yes, so soon you will be able to buy art by me and by Fenn, and I think by the other artists as well. You'll be able to buy that through the website. There will be a shop facility where you'll be able to buy prints. So Fenn has a lino cut, I have a lino cut, and I also have a lithograph. The other artists will also be putting up work on the website, I think. So you will be able to buy art directly through the website. And that is also, by the way, a very good way of supporting the artists and of also supporting this collective venture. So some of that money will be going into doing future ventures like this. So future exhibitions, future publications, and so forth.
Just going back to the point, I think there's some interesting stuff about, I love that line there, the new material, old expressions, and yet to be discovered media. And again, I think this sort of ties back into this ideas of vitality at the same time. You know, I love oil painting, but you know, there was a time before oil painting. Is there going to be a time after oil painting, for example? I'm not saying that's necessarily now, etc. But it does show that things change, or in certain times, in certain periods, just like a great concert that goes on, there's different elements that are pulled out and emphasized. You know, sometimes it's the violin, sometimes it's the horn section, sometimes it's the cello, for example. Just to give you an example of that, a lot of my work is textile based, and I'm very interested in the art of weaving and the story through patterns. And for example, for the Byzantine Empire, those great inheritors of Roman fame, textiles were one of their most important artistic mediums. In fact, obviously the Romans are famous for their sculpture, inheriting from the Greeks, but the Byzantines very much gave up their larger sculptural habits and gained a new habit through weaving and through textiles at the same time. So, maybe the tune of our age is going to be played slightly differently to what it's been for the last couple of 100 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what I like about this point as well is it's not completely cutting out new media, and it's not just a complete this idea of we must return and do everything by the absolute traditional standards. There are certain effective ways that you can transmit multiple different elements of human struggle or anything related to the divine or the transcendent, but you can do it in new ways or ways that are more using materials that are more in our time now. I think that's I almost encourage it. I think it's important for people to be using a host of different approaches and materials to do things. Of course, there are limits. I mean, it's when we talk about new materials, I mean, it immediately makes me think about what a lot of people were doing at art school, and that was sort of playing with projectors and sort of throwing chocolate around a studio and all that kind of nonsense. But I mean, there are limits. Obviously, it still has to be a genuine piece of artwork. But I think it's important to take that into account, and also, it can also be taken to its extremes on the return stance, where I remember not that long ago there was a guy saying to me, he was watching me carve some stone, and it was a large piece of stone, monumental piece of stone, and he said to me, wait, do you use power tools to cut away the rough piece, the rough blocks of that stone? And I said to him, well, yeah, because otherwise, if I didn't use certain power tools to rough out some of the larger chunks, and if I was simply doing it just with a hammer and chisel, then it would be, it would take best part of a year or so just to create one piece. And this guy was more of a sort of a returner, and he was like, oh no, but it should be done with the absolute traditional standard and all this kind of stuff. And, it gets very kind of, God, we are in this modern time now where we do have the luxuries of using a grinder, for example, to take away.
And also, you should have pointed out to him that, Michelangelo had a horde of us. Well, okay, not with stone carving, but many sculptors have had hordes of assistants to do that sort of thing. And if you had the money for pupils, you'd have them doing it.
Yes, you could have a series of little slaves to just do all that for you. Indeed, a number of these workshops of the past did have that. But of course, that was a different time and an entirely different structure. Making art today now, certainly in the system that we are in, is very much a individual act. It's not something that you don't have access to multiple different young apprentice students to sort of do the manual labor of these things. So no, I encourage people to, where they can, use certain tools or certain things where they can speed up the process. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't take away from the final piece of work or the artifact that you create at the end. It's still the human touch. You're still using the hammer and chisel at the end to finish it. And so there's still that very much human element to what you've created. So I think it's an important thing to mention.
Just on that, like, I have a ever so slightly different viewpoint on that, if I may, Fen. And I think the use of any technology, whether it is a chisel or a CNC machine, will make its mark on the work ultimately. And I think, but because of the kind of the power of that, you'll be able to read. You'll be able to read it in the quality of the work itself. And I'll just give an example of that. There is a big habit nowadays of 3D scanning, 3D printing, and then casting statues.
Absolutely.
There's an epidemic. There's an
That's
epidemic.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Terrible sculpture. Now
Agreed.
This is a process where there is no humanity whatsoever. I mean, maybe choosing the figure.
It's extraordinarily sterile.
Yeah, you can select the figure or choose what they wear, etc. But one of the most important understandings about art is that you're taking from reality, you're taking it into the imagination, and then you're through the power and vitality of your body, you're transforming it into something else, and that is the process of art itself. And what those guys are doing is effectively using a machine to do the whole process. So I think, like I said, the tools that you use will make their mark on the work.
That is extreme. Yeah.
So sorry to keep interrupting you, Fen. But yeah, the way that Fen was talking about it, the fact that you're taking away stone that no one will ever see, like, it's not going to have a significant impact on the work itself. It still feels like an organic and vital piece because you do the finishing at the last moment. So it's a good artist can navigate this new terrain of technology, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point you bring up, and a very, very important line to be drawn. It is so true. So many of the public monuments and statues and whatever you see being thrown up these days in America and Europe and all over the place are produced via, having just a figure standing there. Someone 3D scans them, and then you have someone make a sort of botch it together in a 3D program, and then it's CNC'd, or it's just cast into wax and then directly into bronze, and you have this weird kind of uncanny, strange shape approach to what's going on. It looks very sterile. There's no real composition to it. It's just like an enlarged 3D scanned figure in bronze. You're seeing them popping up all over the place now as you see less and less sculptors actually making anymore. And I think it's great that you've brought this up, because indeed, that sort of new media or new approach is horrific, because it is sterile and it entirely cuts out the human being.
Check out Fenn's Twitter, because you were retweeting that sculpture that was unveiled in Rotterdam.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, which is a real horror. Anyway, I invite people to just look up statue Rotterdam and see what you find.
And that's exactly it's been produced with that exact same thing. It's just
horrible facture and texture, and it's lifeless.
It's utterly lifeless, and it's something that if they had employed an actual monumental sculptor to be engaged in such a project like that, they would have worked on creating an actual composition, something that the eye can dance with, that can be enjoyed from 360 degrees, and not simply just a figure blown up to abnormal standards and size that is 3D scanned and just turned into a bronze work. I mean, it is extraordinary that something like that can happen. But of course, this is again the democratization of sculpture. Very few people really are engaged with sculpture anymore, and so when this goes into a public square, people just look at it and go, "Oh, it's a figure. Great. It looks like someone. Great." And the sort of people don't really know what to do. I mean, a lot of people find it hideous, and a lot of people are just like, "Well, I guess it's a sculpture, right?" I mean.
Someone in chat has asked, is music the exception to the technology rule? I just want to say that I think it follows in very much the similar vein. I'll just give you an example. Imagine you're trying to compose a piece of work, but the only piano instrument you're allowed to use, imagine you're using like a Fruity Loops or a Ableton Live or something like that. You can only use a 1980s synth for your piano part. All of your music is going to have a certain feel or a certain mark on it because of the technological restrictions. So, I think very much technology does leave, a footprint or an element. I'll give you a more classical example. The difference between egg tempera and oil painting in terms of the luminosity and the value of colors is fundamentally different. With tempera being very bright and vivid, would we ever have had a Bosch if it was everything was in egg tempera? I don't think it would have worked. His dark landscapes, would be just like too vibrant and buzzy at the same time. So, in my opinion, I don't want to go into it too much. Technology is a powerful tool. You can see it in the work, but the artist needs to navigate that and to understand when to use it and when not to use it.
Yes.
And people just don't know how to use technology nowadays. They rely on it like a crutch, and they try and fool people, which I think is even worse. They try and they'll show like, here's me. Oh, I'm sculpting this work, which they've just CNC'd. Many pictures of that where they'll be like, "Oh, I'm doing a finishing touch on it," or whatever. They're just very dishonest about it. We need to be honest about when we're using stuff and how we're using it at the same time. That's all I'll say.
No, I think it's great that you say that the magic word there, honesty, because, you know, a piece of sculpture that is actually carved or modeled or worked on has an honesty to it. And that honesty is what's also known as magnetism. It's that human magnetism that, you know, is sort of expressed out from the work and draws you in. If you go to sort of high quality art fairs, like TFAF or something like that, you will come across artworks that have this magnetism because they are made by the human touch. They are made by the human hand. And there is a sort of magic to them. And you know, it is that human response that we have to a work. And it's the opposite of that naturally, of course, is it's the sterile, machine made, which isn't felt in the body. And there is no sort of intelligence of the body and eye of the artist in the work that is sort of accentuating certain forms or dampening certain forms that you know make it that give it that extra resonance. You know, that's the important thing.
Okay, brilliant. Let's go on to the next one. Point number 6, we welcome others to join us, but we reserve the right to disassociate ourselves from any such group or individual antithetical to our aims. Both individual excellence and group solidarity are important and must be balanced. Now, I'm kind of surprised you said this, Alex, after I saw your rider for the exhibition and that, you know, your demands to be to be shown. I'm just joking, of course. Sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, like I do not want any of the red Skittles. They will have to be removed from the bowl before I will enter the building. And you agreed to that. Actually, those are really interesting because they're not actually to do with Skittles. It's actually to do with checking whether or not the other party's actually read the contract.
Right. Okay.
It's a way of finding out whether or not they're competent. I hope we will display our competence as well. We certainly will be displaying our competence or otherwise at the exhibition. So, yeah. So we're asking people. We're not an exclusive group. Obviously, we have selected people for this exhibition. We've kind of self-selected. We've also selected the work within the exhibition to make sure it's sort of there are points of commonality. Also, the fact that, you know, we're expressing the best of our work. So we're inviting people to follow these principles. Also, maybe to join us in future events because we see this as just the first of many events. And we're sort of welcoming people to join us. However, we are also saying that you are welcome to follow our principles and to join us and maybe even collaborate with us in future and for us to collaborate with you. But we may, if you don't, it's not really a question of ability or competence. So we're not saying, oh, you know, if you can't paint up to a certain level, we're not going to let you into the group. Obviously, you have to reach a certain level to be exhibited and to fit with the rest of us. But the point is more that if you're there to cause drama, if you're there to cause trouble, if you're there to say stupid things and do stupid things and show us in a bad light, whether or not you mean to, we reserve the right to disassociate ourselves from you. So there's just a sort of protection device. So it's a welcome, but it's a sort of reminder that we will be, I'm afraid, we will be gatekeeping to a degree. But you are very welcome to follow these principles independent of us.
No, I think that's good. I think it's always important to have a certain level of how should you say, you know, in these times and with the sort of characters that you find, there's a lot of bad actors out there, and certainly with collectives that I've seen in the past or certain groups coming together, there are certain people who want to derail or do silly things, or, you know, try and say, oh, I'm part of this group, and actually they're not, and then they try and, you know, bring the vibe down, or whatever they will do. And those certain bad actors out there are obviously people that we don't particularly want to be associated with. Not only that, but there are also certain galleries out there or certain organizations out there that, you know, will say, oh, let's do a show, or we'd like to work with you on an exhibition. And then you find that it comes with all sorts of red tape. Ah, yes, but it has to be about this and it has to be about that, and you have to toe the line to this degree, and it has to be about that, and what you realize is, you're sort of selling your soul to the devil, and so you have to always be careful, and there always has to be a certain type of curatorship that is held with the kind of people that you associate with, and I think that's quite good to have within life in general, to be honest with you, but certainly for an art group that is in its nascent stage.
I mean, one thing I would say is that what people often ask for is just like what the left-wing activist artists are doing, but then for the right. And I think we're not particularly interested in doing that either.
Yeah,
so
amen.
Amen to that. Yes,
I would be upfront about that. But what again? I think this idea of vitality and fire is two important watchwords. They're two important watchwords for us, and we hope that this will spread into other groups, other teams, younger generations, keen to make their mark. And I would just very much encourage, if you are a young artist inspired by any of this, to find some people similar to you, similar to your age, and to try and work collaboratively with them, and to see what you can do in your own right.
Absolutely, because we were also great proponents of localism as well.
Yes,
we're an international group coming from different places in Europe, but we're also looking to collaborate with Americans and Canadians and people
that would be amazing
overseas, not just in Europe but also over there as well. But we do very much would love to see local schools arise, local schools of art, as in sort of groups of artists working together.
Absolutely.
And if you have a look through some of the art movements of the 19th century, they often operated like waves. And for example, it blows my mind that Russian symbolism was going on at the beginning of like World War One. Was it Venetsov, for example? I think that literally got like the Soviet award from Stalin or something like that. He was so contemporary to the Second World War. But obviously symbolism started 40 years before, maybe even earlier than that.
You find sort of symbolists starting out in the 1860s, and then many of them lived on. I mean, I think there was a Belgian symbolist who lived until like 1952 or something. Imagine what he'd seen. So
good God, wow.
People can kind of it's absolutely. So and also you find like lots of international movements have different branches. So for example, like the Surrealist movement had different branches. Cubist movement, obviously, and the Italian branch of that became essentially the Futurist movement, which was very important. Vorticists, a British version associated with Futurism. So absolutely, we're looking for you guys out there to do your own thing, and we are happy to promote and support you. We really want these things to get off and to gain momentum in your own countries, in your own localities, if possible. But I know that in some of you are feeling quite dispersed and disparate, and so you naturally get drawn to international groups, especially like ours. And thank you for the support. And we'll keep an open mind about future collaborations and stuff. But we're hoping that this will strengthen both localism and international action, with a theme of producing great art.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you touch on that, because it really is my absolute wish that we will see in the next coming years, other groups forming, other different, artists coming together in America, Canada. It would be so invigorating actually to see other groups coming together, because that would really show that there is an organic stream of culture again, and not one that is entirely astroturfed, not one that is entirely institution controlled. That would be absolutely fantastic to see, and I think it would certainly give me a hell of a lot of energy to see that going on, and then to have these sort of collaborations where they can take place. And I really, I keep my DMs open on Twitter, and I'm always really excited to see someone who will message me and say, oh, I'm just starting out with this, and I'm painting, and these ideas are coming, and I'm inspiring on this, and I'm inspiring on that. And that is so good to see. That it's so good to see that people are making again, and they're starting to get involved in making. It's such a key thing to be putting our focus to now.
Yeah, and I would also say, even if you're just an amateur artist and you don't have any pretensions towards exhibiting, certainly at this early stage, I would say, go ahead, make things for yourself, make things for your family, for the people around you. Get excited by doing stuff yourself. Get involved, even though, you may never, have a big exhibition or publish a catalogue or something. There is still value in what you do. There is still value in your action, and remember that.
Yeah. Very true.
Okay, and on to the last point, number 7. We hold that art serves mankind by showing heroism, bravery, nobility, and vigour. Artists should embody these aspirations as much as possible. Have courage and recognise that you may be called upon to suffer for these principles. It is an honour to serve. It is a privilege to be envied by those less able to.
Yeah, so essentially this is, if you put your head above the parapet, you may receive fire. You may be criticized. You may be damned or rejected as reactionary, which I would say is perhaps a badge of honor. But there may be a cost for you, especially if you're an established artist and you already have collectors, or you've worked with the Arts Council, for example. This may be painful and difficult for you, but I think that this system is poisonous, and it is poisoned, and you should be able to stand aside from that and have courage in your convictions and say, I will not work for this regime. I will not pretend that I believe in equality and egalitarianism. I will not serve the state. And that could come at a cost to you, but obviously everyone has to weigh up their principles and how they have to serve their family and their community and so forth. But I think that you really should consider standing up and taking a position that may draw criticism. I've done that. Fenn's done that. Ferro has done that. There are other artists involved with us who have paid small or large prices for what they've done. And I would encourage you to be brave, and also to support people who are being brave, even if you feel like you cannot be brave yourself.
It's a very, very, very good point, and one that I continually encourage is that, if you look back in history, the movements and the groups that came together, say for example the Vorticists, these groups that have come together in the past, these artists, they were brave, and they went ahead with their intuitive response, and they truly did stand for something, and they had an element of either madness or bravery, but certainly they had the guts and the balls to go ahead and really stand for something, and really stand for art, and actually, not just live in this sort of, well, if I just toe the line, then everything's going to be okay. I mean, I had that choice a number of years ago. I could have done that. I had opportunities that I could have simply just been a goody two-shoes artist and just played the game, and doors would have continued to open, but I would have been living a lie. And I can't think of anything worse to live a lie. We live in this time now. We have this life. And I think it's the best thing you can do is live it to the most truthful that you can. I think that's very important to keep in mind, that you may just regret it when you're on your deathbed, when you look back and you say, good God, I could have done something. I could have stood outside of this, and I would have been aligned with truth rather than just, playing to the party line.
Absolutely. And I would say also, even if you're not an artist, you can do a little bit to help out by even something as small as liking this video, sharing this video, telling people about this exhibition, just going and visiting, taking a look, spreading the word, perhaps buying something if you have a little bit of money, or just sharing stuff on social media. You can do your part as well, even if it's just a small thing, and that's always appreciated.
I think for me, this last point actually is very powerful, because it asks the very question as to what is the purpose or the utility of art. And I think most people approach it from a purely materialistic perspective. Art is entertainment. It is a Thursday night date night with the wife, where I'm going to look at some things, just nod along, and I'm here to be entertained. It entertains me. Or maybe for some people, it's an investment. This is the worst kind of human being, in my opinion. It's a replacement for gold, or for money in a highly inflating environment. I can buy 1/10,000th of a Picasso.
Or you could buy a sculpture by Fen De Villiers that will rocket in value, or a print by Alexander Adams, which is a guaranteed investment. This is not financial advice, asterisk.
But what Adams lays out here is to say that maybe art is something more than what I've just talked about. These kind of materialist ideas. Maybe art both generates and requires these attributes. When we look at some of the greatest works, it can inspire us to be better human beings. I always think about how the ancients thought about art as having the power to move people. That it emits, it radiates a power out of it. And what I think we're looking to try and not even do, but even to start to do, is to create art that can move people, even just a little bit, in one of these areas, and to say that the art is more than entertainment. It is transcendent. It has a purpose to inspire and to guide mankind itself.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Pharaoh. It goes back to that thing that we spoke about before. Art and culture is a living substance that is kept alive by those who are engaged in it. It's not something that lives on simply behind a piece of glass. It's something that is enacted in the real space. It's a conversation between human beings. It's a partaking in culture. That is what we are doing as artists today, as this collective coming together. We are artists partaking in culture. Many of us have been taken out of that ability to partake in culture, and now we're coming together and saying, no, we will. We're going to partake in culture, and we're going to carry on and do what our ancestors would have done. And I think that's a very important thing to do, and I encourage many other artists to do that. It is an important thing.
Yeah, and I would say that Fenn and I think slightly less for the other artists, but we're slightly more established and better known. So this is the only reason I'm singling us two out. We have deliberately turned our back on sources of security and prestige and money to take the position that we have now, and that's come at considerable cost. And we're not looking for sort of pity or sympathy. We're just asking you to consider that. And if you think that that's important, then please find a way of supporting us, even if it's just in a symbolic way.
So should we round this out with? Oh, there's a quote here from I don't know if you know this guy, Fen De Villiers, pretty famous guy.
Yeah.
Fen, do you want to read out your little quotes here at the end?
Yeah, sure. So I put, remember, in aesthetically starved times, the most revolutionary act is to actually make something. Our raison d'etre is to imagine things that aren't here yet. That's what artists do. That's how we break through into new, exciting realms. Artists break free.
Here.
There we go. Very, very beautiful and very poetic. So thanks for that, Fen. So that is our principles. I think it's a very good summary of some of the bigger philosophic ideas behind the show. I'd highly recommend checking it out. It's going to be. I've heard some people say it's going to be the artistic event of the century. Genuinely, some person has said that. They did say it in a negative sense, but
so some people are saying it. You know, I've heard people. That's what people are saying. That's what people are telling me. Yeah,
I'm going to put that quote. I'm going to put the quote on the website, maybe. But
where can they find out more about this?
Yes, you can go to the-exhibition.co.uk. Take a look through some. We've got a selection of artist work. They're not necessarily going to be at the show. I think there's a lot of pieces that have been created for the show. Lots of new pieces, lots of new work, lots of old work. Even if you're not that arty, just come along down and see if you're moved by something. You know what? I've heard a lot of people saying they're going to bring someone as well. This is the perfect chance to bring a loved one. You know, you can say that you know one of the artists there.
Are you saying that this is maybe a date event? Having said that art is not entertainment, here you are suggesting that maybe people bring a date.
I'm saying that you're going to inspire your potential date to greater nobility by bringing them on, by bringing them along.
Oh, okay.
It's a great date night opportunity, guys. That's basically what Ferro's saying.
Yeah. And also do keep checking the website after the exhibition, because there are going to be photographs of the exhibition. There are going to be perhaps some video panoramas. There may even be clips of speeches or events. But the opening events are not, I think, going to be sort of photographed or anything. But there may be there may be audio recordings of speeches or talks.
Yeah.
And also remember to check out the shop, because there will be work going up there very, very soon.
Because I know a number of people like their anonymous, like to stay anonymous, and that's totally fine. There's many people at the event that don't wish to be on film or photographed, so that's totally fine. We won't be filming or photographing people at the event. Certainly the work will be photographed and videoed. I will make a video of the exhibition to share, so that people who couldn't join from America and other different parts of Europe will certainly be able to see the exhibition in a video. So yeah, we'll definitely put that online. Great. Any final words, Alex?
No, just thank you for inviting me on, Ferro. I really love the streams that we've done. If you haven't already checked out the streams that Ferro, Panama Hat, and myself did, please do. They are all archived on Ferro's channel, on which you are watching this, and hopefully be able to do some more of those in future. Thank you very much for the positive words about the exhibition before. I hope that we will live up to the standard that we have promised, and that there will be future events in different places, so maybe a place closer to you that you will be able to visit.
Fenn, a last rousing speech, please.
Well, no, thanks so much for having me on, Ferro. Always a pleasure. Great that we can amplify and talk about this exhibition. Really looking forward to seeing everyone during the week of the show. I'll be around in London. Looking forward to catching up, talking about art, talking about aesthetics, talking about sculpture, and making connections, meeting people. It would be an absolute pleasure. I hope to meet other artists, but not just artists. Hopefully, other people who are interested in culture, people who are interested in art. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I'm buzzed. There's a lot of energy coming with me, so I'm excited.
Wonderful. Tuesday next week. See you there. Goodbye.